The doctor had just said cancer when my phone lit up. My wife had already emptied our savings, changed her number, and walked away with everything, without a goodbye. I didn't beg or chase her, I stayed quiet and prepared. She thought I was finished. But she had no idea what that silence was about to cost her. Before I walk you through every step of what followed, take a moment to support this story, subscribe, leave a comment about where you're watching from, and help it reach people who might recognize these signs before it's too late. The message came while my hands were still shaking from the diagnosis. 5 words. No punctuation. No explanation. Just certainty. Beneath it sat a screenshot of an account I'd memorized down to the last cent, now showing 0. I stared at my phone long enough for the screen to dim, then light back up again, as if it was asking whether I was ready to accept what had just happened. My name is Caleb Mercer. 32 years old. Lead technician at Iron Ridge Auto in Briarwood, Idaho. 4 hours earlier, I'd been sitting on a paper-covered exam table while a calm voice explained lymphatic systems and treatment timelines. Stage 2. Manageable. Hard, but survivable. The kind of news that makes you grip the edge of the chair and silently promise yourself you'll fight. I walked out to the parking lot afterward and called my wife, Natalie. Asked her to meet me at home. Told her it mattered. She said she was busy. Errands. Deadlines. She'd be back later. When I pulled into the driveway, something already felt off. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like it belonged to both of us anymore. Inside, the air was wrong, too still, like a place after people move out. Half the closet was empty. Her shoes were gone. Her work bags missing. The suitcase we only used for trips was nowhere to be found. The wedding photo on my nightstand, the one where we're laughing because the judge mispronounced our names, had been removed. Not tossed aside. Taken carefully. Then my phone buzzed. I didn't sign up for this. That was it. Along with proof she'd transferred everything we'd saved, $36,000 built over 5 careful years, into an account only she controlled. I didn't yell. I didn't punch the wall. I typed back 2 words, take care. Then I set the phone down, opened a beer I didn't even want, and sat on the back deck watching the sun slide behind the trees. The cancer felt distant in that moment. Abstract. But the betrayal sat heavy in my chest, solid and undeniable. My neighbor Ron leaned over the fence a while later. Saw Natalie leave earlier, he said. Car was packed. Got some medical news, I replied. She didn't take it well. He nodded once. Didn't ask questions. If you need anything, let me know. My wife always cooks too much. I thanked him and went back inside. That's when I pulled out the folder my Uncle Harold had given me a month earlier. He'd spent decades in estate planning before retiring and still had a habit of thinking 3 steps ahead. When my grandfather passed and left me a small parcel of land north of town, Harold insisted on helping me organize everything. People think planning is pessimistic, he'd said. It's protection. I'd updated my will. Started documenting assets. Opened a secondary account for the eventual land sale. Even began paperwork to list Natalie as co-owner on my restored 70 coupe, though I hadn't filed the final transfer yet. Every step had been about safeguarding our future. Now it felt like I'd been quietly safeguarding my own. I called Harold that night. Remember when you said plans can change fast? I asked. Yes, he replied carefully. What happened? I need to change everything. Sleep didn't come. Memories did instead. I met Natalie at a friend's engagement party years earlier. She worked downtown as a legal assistant, confident, articulate, always 2 steps ahead in conversation. We moved in together within months. Married quickly. For a while, it worked. We bought a fixer-upper. I rebuilt it with my hands while she picked finishes and posted progress photos online, calling us a team. But there were signs I ignored. Her parents never hid their disappointment. Her father, a corporate attorney, introduced me as Natalie's husband, never by name. They funded her life in ways I never could. 3 months before I got sick, Natalie started talking about moving to Cascade City. Bigger firms. Better circles. I resisted. My job was solid. The house nearly paid off. She grew quiet after those talks. Distant. Then came the comments. Comparisons disguised as conversation. Questions that felt like judgments. I told myself marriages had phases. When I found an apartment brochure tucked into her purse, I still didn't confront her. I just called Harold and quietly started documenting everything. 2 weeks later, swollen lymph nodes sent me to the doctor. 3 days after the diagnosis, Natalie left. 3 days after that, chemotherapy began. The nurse asked who was picking me up. I said I took a ride. She gave me a look I couldn't quite place, pity mixed with understanding. That night, I ended up on the bathroom floor, sweating and shaking, alone in a house that suddenly felt too big. I called my sister Mara in North Bend and told her everything. She wanted to drive up immediately. I asked her to wait. The next morning, the bank confirmed Natalie had emptied the accounts less than an hour after my call from the hospital parking lot. That was the moment something inside me shifted. The sadness didn't vanish, but it hardened into purpose. I drove to Harold's house with every document I owned. He read silently, jaw tightening. "She knew you were sick," he said. "And she moved the money anyway." "What does that mean?" "It means she didn't just leave," he replied. "She exposed herself." That afternoon, an email came from Natalie's cousin Leah. She apologized. Said the family was shocked. I asked one question: did she know about my diagnosis? The answer came fast. Yes. She told everyone. I sat back in the chair, sunlight spilling through the window, and for the first time since the diagnosis, everything sharpened into focus. Natalie thought she'd escaped at the right moment. She had no idea she'd chosen the worst one possible. The first round of treatment stripped away my appetite before it touched the cancer. Food tasted like metal. Water felt heavy in my stomach. The nurse explained this was normal, that the body reacts before the mind does, but knowing that didn't make the nights easier. I spent most of them awake, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to a house that no longer had two rhythms inside it. I told people Natalie was away. Saying she was gone felt like admitting failure. Saying she'd emptied our accounts felt humiliating. So I stayed vague. Vague was safer. On the fourth day after chemo started, a letter arrived addressed to both of us. Divorce paperwork. Filed fast. Efficient. Cold. She cited irreconcilable differences and requested to be removed from the mortgage, while also demanding half the equity. There was no mention of the money she'd already taken. No acknowledgement that she'd walked away the same day I was told I might die if I didn't fight. I drove straight to Harold's house. He read the letter slowly, twice. Then he leaned back and folded his hands. "She's testing how weak she thinks you are." "I don't have the energy for a war," I said. "You won't need one," he replied. "But you do need to stop reacting and start controlling the pace." That was when he explained something I hadn't considered. Natalie hadn't just left emotionally, she'd left legally exposed. Joint funds moved during a known medical crisis. No written separation agreement. No disclosure. And worse, she'd taken everything, not half. "What do I do?" I asked. "You wait," Harold said. "And you document." The waiting nearly broke me. Chemo fog blurred days together. Some mornings I woke up unsure if it was Tuesday or Friday. My sister Mara finally came up after finding out from a coworker that Natalie had told people I was too much to deal with. Mara cleaned, cooked, drove me to appointments. She didn't ask questions I couldn't answer. Texts from Natalie began arriving from new numbers. "We need to be adults about this. You can't freeze me out. My lawyer says I'm entitled to more than you think." I didn't respond. The next letter from her attorney escalated things. Now she wanted partial claim on my grandfather's land. Retirement accounts. Any future proceeds from property not yet liquidated. It read less like a settlement request and more like a grab before time ran out. Harold smiled when he read it. "She's guessing." "Guessing what?" "That you're broke. That you're desperate. That you'll fold." He was right. Natalie believed she'd left at the exact moment I was weakest. She had no idea I'd already insulated the things that mattered. 2 days later, the bank sent a certified notice. Natalie had attempted to access our safe deposit box. The one containing the deed, vehicle title, and inheritance paperwork. She didn't have the second key. She was getting nervous. That same afternoon, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Natalie. I know you blocked my other number. This is unfair." Unfair. I stared at the word for a long time before turning the phone face down. Harold called me that evening. "I think someone's feeding her information." "What do you mean?" "She knew about the box. She knew about the land. That knowledge didn't come from you. Her father." That was the answer before he even said it. Connections. Influence. Quiet phone calls. Harold didn't sound worried. "That just means we can steer the narrative." "How?" "We let them overhear what we want them to hear." The next day, I called the real estate agent handling my grandfather's land sale. Loudly. Asked about accelerating the timeline. Mentioned medical bills. Made sure the call happened from my cell. Then I called my retirement account provider. Asked about early withdrawals. Penalties. Made sure the words liquidating assets were spoken. I didn't touch anything. I just spoke. 3 days later, Natalie's lawyer sent another letter, this one specifically demanding a share of any land proceeds and retirement withdrawals. Harold laughed out loud. Hook, line. That night, I felt something unfamiliar. Control. The chemo still hurt. My hair began coming out in clumps. I lost weight fast. But inside, I wasn't drifting anymore. Then came the hospital parking lot. I was walking out after treatment when I saw the car idling near the entrance. Silver. Polished. Expensive. Her father sat inside, watching the doors. I walked straight up and knocked on the window. He rolled it down, eyes flicking over my frame like I was a liability being assessed. Caleb, you look thinner. Cancer will do that. Why are you here? Natalie is concerned, he said smoothly. She feels you're being unreasonable. I laughed before I could stop myself. Is that what she calls draining our savings and leaving the day I was diagnosed? She panicked, he said. People make mistakes. No, I replied quietly. They make choices. He sighed. You need to be practical. Legal fights are expensive. Stress is dangerous for someone in your condition. That was the tell. They thought I was cornered. Tell Natalie I'll respond by the end of the week, I said and turned away. I met Harold and his colleague, Catherine, 2 days later. She specialized in financial disputes involving medical abandonment. She didn't soften her words. This is clean, she said after reviewing everything. Documented timeline. Witness confirmation. Clear asset movement. What happens next? I asked. We file first. The filing went out Friday morning. By noon, Natalie's attorney requested an emergency meeting. The panic arrived faster than I expected. Sunday night, Natalie texted again. This is cruel. I made a mistake. You're trying to ruin me. I stared at the screen, then typed my first response in weeks. Actions echo. Monday morning, she walked into the conference room looking rested. Tanned. Like she'd spent the last months on a beach while I learned how to sleep sitting upright to avoid nausea. She didn't look at me. Her lawyer began speaking. Catherine interrupted him once, and ended the conversation entirely. When she laid out the evidence, the room changed temperature. The bank records. The timing. The witness email confirming Natalie knew. The check to her parents. Her father went silent. The settlement terms weren't gentle. Full return of funds. Relinquishing claims. Fees assumed. Or escalation. They asked for 48 hours. I didn't feel victorious walking out. I felt empty. 2 days later, Catherine called. She accepted. The money arrived 30 days later. Every dollar. I paid down medical bills. Stabilized accounts. Finished treatment cycles with something I hadn't had before, certainty. But the story wasn't over yet. Because survival changes things. And remission would change them even more. The money returning didn't feel like relief the way I'd expected. It felt like air rushing back into a room after a long suffocation, necessary, but not comforting. A cashier's check sat on my kitchen counter for several minutes before I touched it, as if I needed proof it wouldn't vanish again. $36,000. The same amount Natalie had taken, now traveling back through channels she never expected to reopen. I deposited it that afternoon and went straight to the oncology office to reduce my outstanding balance. The receptionist, Eva, glanced at the amount and raised her eyebrows. Looks like insurance finally caught up. Something like that, I said. She smiled. Your labs from last week looked better. Not perfect, but better. Better had become my favorite word. Not healed. Not finished. Just better. The divorce papers were finalized the following week. Catherine handled everything. I signed my name in 3 places, each signature lighter than the last, until it felt less like ending a marriage and more like closing a file. There was no dramatic goodbye. No apology from Natalie. No explanation. She didn't show up. Her lawyer did. When it was over, Catherine gathered the documents and slid them into a folder. You're free, she said simply. I nodded, though freedom felt abstract at the time. Freedom didn't erase scars. It didn't undo nights on cold tile floors or the way I'd learned to measure silence. But it gave me something important, space. Harold met me outside the office. You held steady, he said. A lot of people don't. I didn't feel steady, I replied. That's not the same thing. Chemo continued for another 6 weeks. My hair fell out completely. I lost another 10 pounds. Some days my hands shook so badly I couldn't hold a wrench. My boss adjusted my schedule and quietly reassigned heavy jobs. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Mara visited every other weekend. She brought groceries, folded laundry, sat with me during the long hours when fatigue pinned me to the couch. She never talked about Natalie unless I did. One night, halfway through my final treatment cycle, I woke up gasping, convinced something was wrong. Mara rushed in, panic flashing across her face. It's okay, the nurse said later after running tests. Anxiety spike. Your body's been through a lot. I nodded, embarrassed. That night, lying awake, I realized something uncomfortable. Natalie leaving hadn't just hurt, it had trained me to expect abandonment. Even now, surrounded by support, part of me waited for the floor to drop. That was the hardest thing to admit. 2 weeks later, I saw Natalie's father again. This time, it wasn't intentional. I was at the bank, finalizing paperwork to move my accounts fully into my name, when I noticed him in the lobby. He froze when he saw me, then approached slowly, like someone approaching a wild animal. "I won't keep you long," he said. I didn't respond. "She's struggling," he continued. This didn't go the way she thought it would. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked, "Did you come to apologize?" He hesitated. "I came to understand." Understand what? How it all turned so completely. I leaned back in my chair. It didn't turn. It revealed. His jaw tightened. "You could have handled it quietly." "I tried," I said. She chose loudly. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once and walked away. That was the last time I saw him. Natalie tried again a month later. A message appeared from an unfamiliar number while I was waiting for blood work. "I heard your treatment is ending soon. I'm glad." I didn't reply. Another message followed hours later. "I know I hurt you. I was scared. I didn't think you'd fight back." That line stayed with me. She hadn't expected resistance. She'd expected collapse. I blocked the number and focused on finishing treatment. The day my oncologist said the word remission, I didn't react right away. I just sat there, letting it settle. Not cured. Not invincible. But clear. For now. "You did the work," she said. "Now live." That night, I called Mara. She cried. Then I called my old friend Evan in Summit Falls, who'd been asking for years if I wanted to join his custom auto shop. "You still got room?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Whenever you're ready." I sold the house in Briarwood a month later. It went quickly. The market was hot. I didn't stage it. Didn't sentimentalize it. I walked through each room once after the sale, thanked it quietly for sheltering me through the worst season of my life, and locked the door for the last time. I used part of the proceeds to buy a small cabin outside Clearwater Ridge. 2 bedrooms. A garage big enough for my tools and the coupe. Mountains stretching out behind it like a promise. Ron and his wife came over the morning I left. They handed me a container of food for the road. "You're doing okay?" Ron asked. I thought about it. I'm learning how. 3 months into my new routine, new shop, new roads, new mornings, I got another message from Natalie. This time, it was longer. She said she'd been in therapy. That she finally understood what fear had done to her. That she regretted leaving the way she did. That she hoped someday I could forgive her. I read it twice. Then I typed 4 words. "I survived. Be well." And I meant it, not as a weapon, but as closure. I blocked the number, put my phone away, and walked back into the garage. The coupe sat there waiting, hood open, engine halfway restored. This time, I wasn't rebuilding it for anyone else. I wasn't planning to sell it. I was restoring it because I could. Because some things aren't meant to be left behind. And because some people, when they walk out too early, never get to see what you become afterward. Life didn't snap into place after remission. That was something no one warned me about. People imagine a bell ringing, a switch flipping, the body returning to some earlier version of itself. What actually happened was slower, almost cautious, like my system didn't trust good news yet. Every ache made me pause. Every cough made me count days. Survival rewires you. The cabin became my anchor. Morning light filtered through tall pines, the air sharp and clean in a way the city never managed. I learned the sounds quickly, the wind moving through branches, the distant rush of water over rocks, the creak of wood as the temperature shifted. Silence out here wasn't empty. It was full. I worked at Evan's shop 4 days a week at first. He didn't rush me. Let me choose projects that fit my strength. I found comfort in the familiar rhythm: diagnose, disassemble, rebuild. Machines made sense. They broke for reasons. They responded to care. People didn't always. On my days off, I focused on the coupe. Piece by piece, bolt by bolt, I brought it back. Some parts needed replacing. Others just needed patience. The process mirrored my own recovery more than I liked to admit. One afternoon, while I was under the hood, a memory surfaced uninvited, Natalie standing in the garage years earlier, arms crossed, watching me work. "You spend more time with that thing than with me," she'd said, half joking. I remembered wiping my hands on a rag and smiling. "This one doesn't leave." At the time, it felt like a harmless line. Now it felt like a prophecy. I shook it off and went back to work. The land my grandfather left me sold quietly that fall. No drama. No rush. The funds went into long-term savings this time, accounts no one else could touch. Harold helped me structure everything so cleanly it felt almost surgical. He didn't say, "I told you so." He never would have. But I could hear the lesson anyway. "You don't plan for fear," he said during one of our calls. "You plan for reality." Reality came knocking again in winter. It started with a letter forwarded from Catherine. Natalie had officially changed her name back. Simple notice. No request attached. Just information. I felt nothing reading it. No spike of anger. No ache. Just acknowledgement. A few weeks later, Leah emailed me again. She said Natalie had moved back in with her parents temporarily. That the cabin they'd owned near the lake was gone, sold to cover debts Natalie hadn't mentioned. That family gatherings were tense now. Quiet. Fractured. I didn't reply. I wasn't interested in her consequences anymore. What did interest me was the subtle return of trust, in myself first, then cautiously in others. I joined a local hiking group. Nothing intense. Just short trails, shared thermoses of coffee, conversations that stayed on the surface until they didn't have to. One woman, Renee, walked beside me often. She didn't ask about my past. Didn't fill silence. She just kept pace. It was unexpectedly comforting. One evening after a hike, she gestured toward my cabin. "You seem settled here." "I'm building toward it," I replied. She smiled. "That counts." It did. Winter slowed everything. Snow piled high. Workdays shortened. Evenings stretched. Some nights, loneliness crept in, not sharp, but persistent. On those nights, I reminded myself that loneliness wasn't the same as being abandoned. That difference mattered. During one of my routine checkups, my oncologist frowned at my chart longer than usual. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "I just want to remind you that recovery isn't linear. If fear spikes, if fatigue returns, that doesn't mean you're failing." "I know," I said. But hearing it helped. That night, I dreamed of the house in Briarwood. Walked through empty rooms. Heard footsteps that weren't there. Woke up sweating. Instead of spiraling, I got up, made coffee, and sat on the porch watching snow fall. I breathed until my pulse slowed. Survival had taught me this too: panic passes if you don't feed it. In early spring, Evan offered me a full partnership at the shop. "You don't have to decide now," he said. "But you're good here. Customers trust you." "I trust you." I told him I needed a week. That night, I called Mara. Told her about the offer. About the cabin. About how things felt, stable. "You sound different," she said. "Not lighter. Stronger." I thought about that. I am. I accepted the partnership 2 days later. The paperwork took time. Lawyers. Accountants. Decisions that once would have paralyzed me. This time, they didn't. I asked questions. I read everything twice. I didn't rush. One evening, while filing documents, I found an old envelope tucked into a drawer. Inside was a note Natalie had written years earlier, something about building a life together, about choosing each other even when it was hard. I stared at it for a long time. Then I shredded it. Not out of anger. Out of accuracy. That promise had expired the moment she chose absence over presence. Late summer brought a surprise storm. Power went out. Rain hammered the roof. I lit candles and sat in the dim glow, listening to thunder roll through the valley. For the first time since everything happened, I allowed myself to feel proud, not of winning, not of outlasting anyone, but of staying. Staying through sickness. Through loss. Through the urge to disappear. The phone buzzed once, startling me. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then another message followed. "I know you won't answer. I just needed to say this out loud somewhere. I see now what I ran from. Natalie." I didn't delete it right away. I read it once. Then again. And then I archived it. No response. No final word. Some stories don't need them. As summer turned again, the coupe finally roared back to life. I stood there, grease on my hands, listening to the engine settle into a steady rhythm. Not perfect. But strong. I took it out on the open road that evening. Windows down. Air rushing in. The mountains blurred past. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't running from anything. I was simply moving forward. Spring returned without ceremony. No announcement. No sudden warmth. Just a gradual softening of the edges, snow melting into streams, mornings stretching longer, my body waking up without the weight it once carried. I noticed it first in small things. I stopped counting hours between aches. I slept through the night without jolting awake. I laughed once, out loud, at something stupid Evan said in the shop and realized it had been weeks since I'd done that. Recovery didn't feel like victory. It felt like permission. The partnership paperwork finalized quietly. My name went on the door beneath Evan's. Customers started asking for me specifically. Word travels fast in small towns, especially when people sense steadiness. I didn't tell them my story. They didn't need it. They just needed to know I'd be there tomorrow. The cabin changed with the season. Windows open. Pine scent drifting in. I built a small deck out back, nothing fancy, just enough space for a chair and a mug of coffee at sunrise. On some mornings, I sat there doing absolutely nothing, and it felt like progress. Renee and I kept hiking. Still slow. Still side by side. Eventually, conversation deepened, not all at once, not forced. She told me about her divorce years earlier, about learning the difference between loneliness and peace. I told her about illness without detailing betrayal. She didn't push. That mattered. One evening, as we walked back toward the trailhead, she said, "You don't talk about her." "I don't need to," I replied. She nodded. "That usually means you're done." I thought about it. No. It means I finished. Summer arrived fully then, bright and unapologetic. The kind of season that asks you to step outside. I took the coupe out on longer drives, sometimes with Renee, sometimes alone. I didn't drive to remember. I drove to feel where I was. The past stayed where it belonged. Until it didn't. The email came from an unfamiliar address late one night. No subject line. Just my name. I almost deleted it without opening. Almost. "I don't expect forgiveness," Natalie wrote. "I don't even expect a reply. But I need to say this where it can't be rewritten or softened. I didn't leave because you were sick. I left because I was afraid of becoming someone who stayed. I told myself stories that made me the victim. They were lies." I read it slowly. Carefully. She went on. About therapy. About watching her parents' marriage unravel after the cabin sale. About realizing too late that escape doesn't erase responsibility. "I know you survived," she wrote. "I know you rebuilt. I see it from a distance. And I understand now that the worst thing I did wasn't leaving, it was believing you wouldn't rise without me." That line sat heavy. I closed the laptop and went outside. The night was quiet, stars sharp against the dark. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt done. The next morning, I forwarded the email to an archive folder and deleted it from my inbox. Not because it hurt, but because it no longer belonged in my present. Weeks later, Catherine called. "I wanted to give you a heads up," she said. "Natalie's former firm quietly let her go." I didn't ask why. "Nothing you need to do," Catherine added. "Just information." After the call, I sat in the shop for a long time, listening to the hum of the lights. Consequences don't always arrive loud. Sometimes they settle in gently, reshaping lives long after the initial damage is done. That night, I cooked dinner for Renee at the cabin. Nothing fancy. We ate on the deck, feet propped up, watching the sun dip behind the ridge. When she reached for my hand, it didn't feel like replacing anything. It felt like adding. "I don't need promises," she said quietly. "Just honesty." "You'll get that," I replied. And I meant it. In early fall, Mara visited again. She looked around the cabin, the shop, the calm in my posture. "You're not just okay," she said. "You're different." "So are you," I replied. We sat together that evening, siblings again, not survivors, not witnesses, just people sharing time. Before she left, she hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she said. "For what?" "For not becoming bitter." That stayed with me. Winter crept in again, softer than the last. The anniversary of my diagnosis passed quietly. No dread. No spiral. Just acknowledgement. I went for a checkup the same week, clear scans. Stable numbers. My oncologist smiled. "You're doing everything right." I smiled back. "I know." On the drive home, I took the long route. Mountains dusted with snow. Roads empty. The coupe steady beneath me. I realized something then, something that surprised me. I wasn't grateful for what happened. But I was grateful for who I became because I refused to disappear afterward. Natalie never reached out again. I heard later, through people who didn't know the full story, that she moved cities. Changed circles. Started over again. Maybe she learned something. Maybe she didn't. It wasn't mine to measure. What I knew was this. When the doctor said cancer, I prepared to fight for my body. When my wife emptied our savings and walked away, I fought for something deeper, my sense of worth, my future, my right to stand without apology. And I won both battles by doing the same thing. I stayed. I stayed present. I stayed careful. I stayed when it would have been easier to collapse. Some people leave at the first sign of weight. Others learn how to carry it, and become stronger for it. I shut off the shop lights one evening and stepped outside, breath fogging in the cold air. Renee waited by the car, smiling. "Ready?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, locking the door behind me. "I am." If my story moved you, if you believe that quiet strength, patience, and standing your ground matter, take a moment to subscribe, share where you're watching from, and pass this story along. Someone out there may need to hear that staying can change everything.